Greetings and welcome to the newest episode of Be Hero Presents the Bump Card Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, as always, Brian, and with me tonight is my tag partner, Psycho. How you doing tonight, Psycho?
I'm doing good. It's WrestleMania week.
I'm so excited.
What's not to be excited about this week? Like, it's pretty good.
And I got a show this weekend too.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's and then you got Hall of Fame on Friday night. I mean, it's a
NXT Saturday morning or Saturday day.
It's a big week of wrestling.
Yep. We be excited. So I hope you guys are excited too. It should be a super fun time. And please stay tuned because I'll give you the information about the upcoming shows for myself on that Friday, as well as information about a bunch of other stuff going on as well. That being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into this bad boy. So this week, we're going to go ahead and talk about WrestleMania, of course. But unlike we've done in the past, where we talked about like last year's build up to rebooking WrestleMania main events, we are actually going to talk about the best and worst WrestleMania openers, the curtain jerker. But before we do that, as we do every week, we have the Wrestling Weekly News. Psycho, kick us off.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to kind of preface this with is that a lot of this news dropped on April Fool's Day. Mm-hmm. And so the first news story I saw wasn't a real news story, but I didn't know. I actually legitimately didn't know it until much later. But because it caught me as a news story. And that is, and I don't know if you heard this or saw this story that was floating out there, that they were going to revive ECW on Netflix, and that it was going to be ran by Paul Heyman, and it was going to be a mix between MMA and pro wrestling, and that was going to be the revival of ECW on Netflix, and it was going to have a more adult theme because they could get away with it on Netflix, and that Triple H and everything had given their blessing, to Paul to run it accordingly. Now, it was a pretty good. I read the article and everything. I was like, this is interesting. This is cool. And they said that they were going to announce it at WrestleMania, and with Paul Heyman going in the Hall of Fame, it was going to be a big deal. Well, I believed it at first, and I mean, it seemed like something that could be done. With it being in Philadelphia, it seemed like something that could be announced then.
Yep.
And then I was still believing it when news trickled in about CM Punk doing an interview. And at first, when I heard some of the things that were trickling out of it, and that he was talking about his time in AEW, and we'll get into some of this here, I was like, oh, this is an April Fool's thing, because I was like, there's NDAs and you can't talk about certain things, and so I was like, there's no way, that this is dropping just unannounced like this, and then it got me thinking. I was like, crap, that ECW story was probably an April Fool's joke too, because that one I believed. The Punk thing I didn't. The ECW thing I did. And so I was like, oh, that's not true either. And then when I found out, when I actually saw video of the CM Punk interview, I was like, holy cow, this is legit. And I was riveted. I watched the whole thing, just digesting it and everything. And then I was like, maybe the ECW thing is still real. If this was, maybe there weren't no jokes. And then I go back in the article and there's a link and it says, April Fools and everything. And I'm like, I was like, okay, so that one really wasn't. So, but just kind of an interesting day as far as me figuring this stuff out. I always hate when stories are dropped, legitimate things happen on New Year's, because you never know what's real. Yeah, sorry, on April Fool's Day, because it's like, what's real, what's not. You
You
know,
know, I didn't hear about the ECW thing, but I would have totally bitten into that too. I did get bit on one. It wasn't a wrestling story; it was a football story, and I was very excited for it, but sad at the same time because one of the 49ers, a wide receiver by the name of Brandon Ayuk, who's looking at being traded, was going to be traded, and this was the April Fool's story, to be traded for him in a 5th round pick to like arguably the best wide receiver in the league right now, Justin Jefferson, to the Niners. And I got sad because you could be leaving, but I got super excited because we get Justin Jefferson. And I remember what day it was, like, oh. So yeah, I could totally see why the ECW thing would bite you, and the Punk thing too. Like I could see that. Side tangent, and it's funny because you called it New Year's earlier. Do you know why April Fool's is a thing?
No.
So the origin of April Fool's comes from the creation of the Julian calendar in Rome. When they created the Julian calendar, before that, the calendar for most people started at the beginning of spring, April 1st. And so after the Julian calendar was established, making it January 1st for New Year's.
Oh.
People were still they were still celebrating New Year's on April 1st. Were called Fools. April Fool's Day.
Okay. Did I just? I know I called it New Year's on that last thing accidentally. That was just the one time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was like, I hope I wasn't calling it New Year's this whole time. That'd be confusing.
Yeah. Nope.
But yeah, and before we get to the Punk thing, one other thing that did happen on New Year's too. Oh my gosh, I'm doing it again on April Fool's Day. On I don't know why I'm getting those mixed up. They're both on the 1st, okay?
As is every month. Anyhow, there was a lot that dropped on April 1st, including the Bray Wyatt documentary, which we'll talk about later.
Yes, but AEW did their first really round of
the releases.
Yeah. Which I found actually very interesting. And my thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear yours. Now, on the surface, it was a bunch of guys that weren't really getting a lot of TV time anyway, at least
not in AEW.
Not in AEW, on Ring of Honor and things like that, sure. But I get it. But at the same time, two things about it. Number one, you're really going to have any other day would have been fine, but you're really going to release them on April Fools. And it's like I'm sure they're thinking like, okay, is this a joke? No, it's not a joke. It's like, that's the worst. Like they're like not sure if they can believe it.
There's more to that too.
Okay. So, we'll get to that, I'm sure. And I'd love to hear your side. The other thing that I really kind of bothers me about it is Tony Khan has went on record in interviews saying that, with when WWE releases guys that, he's like kind of condemned that and saying, we don't do that here. We're a family business here, and that sort of thing, and made it seem like, when you're with us, your contract may run out, but we're not going, unless there's a legitimate reason, we're not letting people go in a mass layoff type thing. And then this happens. And which is between the Punk stuff coming out and this horrible week for AEW, like as far as PR goes.
Oh yeah. Well, one of them is very bad in that release too, dealing with PR, and I'll talk about that in a second. Mm-hmm. But one of them, Dalton Castle, he is actually in the tag team, and in their tag team, they're actually had a match going for the title. They had a storyline building up to it and everything, and it's still going to be aired. Like, it hasn't been aired yet fully, and so they still have to go through all of that. But the one that's really bad is Joe Henry, who was released. Joe Henry actually suffered a neck injury 2 months ago, and he's currently healing. He's on the men right now in IR. and they released him while injured. The WWE has not released somebody while injured. Like, they keep them on the contract until then. So theoretically, ostensibly, Joe Henry is injured and can't wrestle, period. And now he's not getting a steady paycheck while injured. And he's an independent contractor. So how's he going to pay for his insurance and all of his doctor bills for all that stuff? Like, that's really bad on AEW.
Yeah, and then between that and like having like very low rated, dynamites and stuff like that in their attendance, and yeah, it's going to take they need to do something to get some good PR back, because not a good week and not a good look for AEW this week, and specifically for Tony Khan.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on the releases on April Fools before we get into the Punk stuff?
No. Again, a lot of the guys were there. This does tie into it, and a big problem with AEW is a lot of talent, but not a lot of stars. And that's what this was a lot of talent, because all of these people are very talented workers, but there's no room for them, right? And more importantly, there was no room to make stars out of them, because there's no room to put them on TV or even spend a lot of time with them in ROH. Like, Dalton Castle is great, Joe Henry is great, but there's just not time for them. And it's a problem with AEW in general. There's so many workers out there. Like, Britt Baker is not injured, but where's she been?
Right.
And she is like an OG star. They literally had her at one point while injured, spending more TV time than she's had in months. So yeah. It's a problem with AEW, and I don't think this is going to be the last time we see release rounds like this in the near future.
I don't either, and it's weird because they said that it's not budget cuts, is what was really that I heard, is that it's not budget cuts, it's they're changing, how they're going to be managing the roster or something like that, and that since they weren't being used, they thought it was in their best interest to release them so they can go wrestle elsewhere, and get some reps and whatnot. But like you mentioned, with an injury, you can't do that. So that doesn't make any sense, right? Not to keep them, paying them until then. And with all these guys, there's probably about like at least a dozen other guys that aren't being used that probably are making more money that they could get rid of and save more money if it was about budget cuts. So I don't know. I've thought for a while they've had a bloated roster, and a lot of guys that they sign, it's almost like Tony Khan. It's their new toys, right? And then once he gets tired of them, he shelves them. And what are they doing, right? Like where's Saraya? It's like she won the title at Wembley. She lost, didn't have a long reign, lost the title. Like, we've barely seen her.
Yeah, it's just stuff with her on Rampage.
Okay.
Mostly. And it's just stuff with her brother, and the other one that she's with. Mm-hmm. And like, there's not really a story. They're just kind of there.
And that's the thing. That's star power. They have stars that they use until the shine rubs off, of them, and then they don't get used. What a waste of money. And I feel like for somebody like Mercedes Moné, I feel like that's already starting to happen, and she hasn't even had her first match. Not saying that they're not using her, but it's like she made her debut, and now we need to see something from her, or she's going to get stale very fast.
Yep.
And I feel like, well, we'll get into some of this Punk stuff because some of it ties in to a lot of this. Oh boy. And real quick, before we get the Punk thing, just real quick, only other thing that I have news-wise is the inductions for the WWE Hall of Fame on Friday. they announced that Roman Reigns is going to be inducting Paul Heyman. Obviously, The Rock is inducting his grandmother, Leia Maivia. And then those are really the only two that's been announced that I can think of. But I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed out of all the people that they're going with Roman Reigns to induct Paul Heyman when they, we see that all the time. There's so many people that would deserve, and that have known him longer, that could have given a good speech for him.
It's true. I mean, with the Hall of Fame, they give you a kind of a short list of people to pick from. People that will approve by right off the bat. My guess, by the way, of this is they probably already decided 5 months ago who's going in the Hall of Fame, as well as who's probably inducting them. And I'll take a wild guess to say that it was Brock Lesnar that was meant to induct him initially, which would have been a better choice than Roman Reigns. But with everything going on with Brock and everything else, I don't think I think that's why it didn't happen.
Yeah, I would think, since it's in Philadelphia, though, it would have made sense, too, for somebody like a Tommy Dreamer or somebody like that to induct him, or Rob Van Dam, right? Roman Reigns, I can only think that Roman was chosen because Paul Heyman is so old school in the fact that he's probably thinking, we're going to talk about, my career, but I want to focus on the here and now and the future. And so with Roman doing it, it's building, it can build into that story that we're doing right now and help forward that. And so Paul Heyman's probably thinking, it does nothing for the current thing. He wants to look forward, probably not back.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I can understand that. I am slightly intrigued to see the first 5 minutes of his induction being "Thank you, my tribal chief. I love you, my tribal chief."
Yes.
But yeah, and then of course, the rumored one for Muhammad Ali, is supposed to be Hogan, which will be interesting to see if they do that one or not. I mean, I think they could. I think it's a long enough time to bring Hogan back. They kind of teased him a couple of shows ago at the Rumble.
Yeah, they had him do the opening, basically, and so it's not like they haven't used him.
And he's also on that good PR run right now after doing that, saving that person in Florida and stuff like that. So, he's got a good PR run going. I think that if they were going to use him, now's the time. And I think for inducting Muhammad Ali, I think he's a good person to do so.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think of who else they could have got, and other than another boxer, something like that from outside, who would you have induct Muhammad Ali? I think Hogan's got to be it.
Well, and from the match that he was in, who would have been who's still alive? That was what, WrestleMania 1?
Yeah. Mr. T.
Yeah, Mr. T is about it.
Mr. T, but Hogan makes more sense.
Yeah.
And we don't need to hear Mr. T talk about things ever again. He'd probably thank his mama for that too. If you remember his Hall of Fame speech.
Oh, I don't know. I'm still can't get Hillbilly Jim's 5-hour one long going out of my head. So
yes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the Hall of Fame. So let's get into the Punk stuff because this is juicy.
All right, go. If you guys don't want to hear it, go ahead and skip ahead about 20-25 minutes. I'm sure that'll be about enough time for Psycho just to get his single rant done, and then I'll try and fill up the rest of it.
Oh, thanks. That's
just old school. Have a fan pull the mic out, disconnect the mic for you.
So, well, I'm going to touch kind of some of these points. Some of them might not be in order, but they're. I'm going to touch some of the things that he said. First of all, I think we discovered why it makes sense that I'm such a huge CM Punk fan. that CM Punk is a Bret Hart guy, right? He
Yeah.
loves Bret Hart, and he did the first part of this interview, where Ariel Hamani had a Bret Hart, almost like it was a Rock'em Sock'em type thing, right? It was, or no, it was what do they call those buddies, right? Wrestling buddies.
Oh, the Wrestle Buddies. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it was a Bret Hart one. And so CM Punk, loved it. He was like, "Oh, that's my guy." And he like was using it basically as a
Well, you
um
know, Punk's been like he's a known like
yes.
heart mark. Okay,
Yes, I know. I know.
okay.
Yeah.
Also, Ariel Armani
Mhm.
is he's like the man of the week, by the way, because of between this and Rhea Ripley, Becky Lynch thing
Mhm.
that went on. Did you saw that too, right?
I saw Becky Lynch's interview with him recently. I did not see the Rhea part of when he
So
went on.
she was on, and she was on for a bit, and then Becky Lynch calls him while they're on the air, and she's like, "Hey, I thought you were going to call me when she was there." Because I guess she'd asked for that when she was doing her interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and I know I just derailed this Punk thing, but you're going to deal with it anyways. And he's like, "Oh, well, she's here on speaker. She's here. Here, let me put you on speaker." So she's on speaker, talking through his phone to her, like to his mic, right? And she's like, "Well, tell her to get her ass ready." And he's like, "What do you mean? Where are you?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm outside right now. I'm outside your door." He's like, "What?" Yeah. And she comes through the door and on the stage, and they start going at it on his show.
Nice.
Sell the match stuff. It was super good.
Nice. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Because they just had Cody Rhodes on, I guess, too. And so that was interesting. I read parts of that one. So some of these points I'm just gonna hit the kind of the bigger stuff. But Punk at one point he said that theoretically he probably could have wrestled at Mania, because his injuries, recovery is going well, but of course they're basically holding him back, basically to save him from himself.
Yeah.
So he's completely 100% before coming in. I don't know, his arm, it was still in the
The brace.
yeah, the brace and everything. Did not look like he's ready to wrestle in a week, so
Well, in his mind, he's probably ready to wrestle like that next day. I mean,
sure.
as wrestlers, we always overestimate how much our bodies will give.
Well, and that's how it used to be in the day too. They almost encouraged it. It's like just tape it up, and work through it, work through injuries. If you don't work, you don't get paid. That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
Right. But I also feel like things are better now, because I feel like a lot of that led to wrestlers dying sooner, because they'd be like, all right, we're just going to take a bunch of pain pills and power through.
Yeah.
So I do feel like it's a better thing now when it comes to that stuff. They actually give time off, and so I think that's awesome, and guaranteed contracts and things like that. Now, and we'll get into more about guaranteed contracts here in a sec, but then they talk about let's see here. At one point Punk talked about when he injured his tricep the first time in AEW, the other tricep, how it's so much different because AEW didn't like help him at all with his recovery. Like, didn't even talk to him for 6 months. So they didn't like give him any recommendations for doctors. He had to do all the research on his own. And then in WWE, they're actually helping him through the process, which I think is a big deal. Just difference in companies.
Mm-hmm. Well, you also have to think too, like AEW doesn't have that clout yet, and doesn't have the experience to deal with stuff like this, to have these world famous doctors, and more importantly, these doctors who know how to work with wrestling injuries.
That's true. You'd think that Tony Khan would surround himself though with people that can help him with that, but
Where in any of Tony Khan's stuff have you ever seen him show that he surrounds himself with anything that's competent? Like, if he did, he would surround himself with writers and bookers, right? Because
right.
he doesn't have any of that.
Well, no, because he puts people on the booking team though that are on their current wrestlers, right? So it's the boys policing the boys, and that very seldom works.
Yeah.
So then, they talk about. Let's see here. So they talk about when he returned to WWE and kind of how that process went down. And that part was interesting. So CM Punk received a call from Nick Khan the Monday, the week of Thanksgiving. Now, keep in mind, Survivor Series is like that following Saturday. So, and they initially called him and like, oh, we might want to use you for the Rumble if you're open to talking and all that. And he was like, no, if it's going to happen, it has to be Survivor Series, right? Because it's in Chicago and everything. So, and they basically were like, well, we didn't know if you had a no compete clause or anything like that. He's like, no, I'm free. I'm good to go. And they're like, oh, and he was like, I was good to go the day after. So they're like, wait a minute. So we could have signed you like the day after. He was like, yeah. It's like Nick Khan was basically like, I wish we would have known that.
Yeah.
Right? Because they could have had him on the Raw, the Monday after he was released or whatever. Which would have been interesting, but I think everything happened perfectly the way it was. And then they talked about Punk talking with Triple H and clearing the air there. And let's see here. They talked about the Raw visit while he was still under contract to WWE, where he basically went backstage when Raw was in Chicago. And they talked about how that came about. Basically, Bayley invited him after he had ran into some people on a plane coming back from doing commentary on one of his Cage Fury fighting shows. And he saw Jason Jordan. And so they got to talking, and Liv Morgan helped Punk find a lost set of his earbuds. And then Bayley called him, because they're close, and invited him to the show. And then he gets kicked out, which he thought he would, but which is really interesting now in hindsight with all of that. Because he also said that after the brawl out thing, or actually, let me backtrack a second there. When he went to Raw and went backstage while he was still under AEW contract, Ariel asked him if anybody from AEW was upset, and he was like, yeah. They used the word betrayed, that they were betrayed that he went, which is really interesting. And then let's see here, they could talk about when he was the first time after the brawl out situation happened. He talks about how he wanted his release then, and he told Tony Khan that having a second show or having a separate show wasn't going to work. And it was Tony Khan's idea to split the rosters basically and have all of his buddies, all the people that got along with him on his show, and put him in charge of that. So, all of this narrative of, Punk demanded he have his own show and stuff. That's not the way Punk says it. And I believe that Tony Khan, because he doesn't know how to deal with confrontation, that he probably was like, have your own show, but I'm with Punk that I don't know how that would have worked because the pay-per-views aren't split. So you got to have them in the building eventually.
I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. It's like he said, and usually the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but I've seen enough of Tony Khan's responses and stuff and how he handles things to know that like that's probably more accurate than not, because that's what everybody else has said about how Tony Khan is. He's a nice guy. Like Tony Khan said, he's a nice guy, but he's not a boss. He doesn't, he's not even the one that really made the decision. I mean, he made the decision to fire Punk, but he didn't.
He didn't do it solely on his own. He had a
he
group
passed the
of
buck.
people. Yeah.
Pardon the pun.
But you also, there's been stories for years, even going into WWE, of Punk being hard to work with and being manipulative, right? And so I could see, based off of stories of that, where Punk maybe had manipulated Tony into doing a little more what he wanted. Maybe not saying exactly like word for word, let's split shows, let's get all my buddies on here, but probably was more manipulative to do a thing, right? I'm not going to give Punk any real leeway on this. In addition, like, Tony probably did say it was, his idea and probably come up with the idea, but there wouldn't be a problem if attitudes didn't cause this thing on both sides, right? So I'm not going to give Punk the leeway on this either.
I am going to say, though, that if Tony Khan was a boss and he just got everybody to sit down in a room together and hash this crap out, he could have made money off of it. Mm-hmm. And that's why the more and more I see, like, of how Tony Khan handles things, it's more, I hear, like, everybody was talking about how it was a rumor that this whole Punk thing was a work, right? And he was going to eventually get into a feud with the Young Bucks and everything. And I hoped that the whole thing was a work, and even the firing was a work. And then obviously with Punk in WWE now and everything, it's like,
it's a hell of a work.
Tony Khan doesn't want to make money like that. He doesn't use those things for money. And so, like, people are saying the Jack Perry stuff, what he's doing in New Japan about saying, that he's being used as a scapegoat, and that he's not he's basically been put on the shelf, basically, and they won't talk to him. They didn't talk to him for a while and all that. People are saying, oh, that's a work for him to come back. I don't think Tony Khan does his business like that. I don't think Tony Khan is smart enough as a booker to make money off of real life situations. I just don't.
I agree with you. You can see it in multiple stages. Like, there's been multiple times between all of this with the Jack Perry stuff on the second time, the Bucks the first time, but even the one before that, right? There was money to be made with Punk and Colt Cabana going into this, right? And especially the way that Colt Cabana was talking about how he was let go from AEW and everything else like that, or not let go but pushed back down to ROH, like that whole thing. There was money to be made there for that story, and Tony Khan just doesn't understand the business in that aspect. And he doesn't have the ability of forcing kids to be adults about shit.
Yeah, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one, because I don't think Punk would have worked with Colt Cabana. Like, he even said in this interview that, like, Colt Cabana actually came up to him to try to talk, and he said, I'm not talking to you ever again without a lawyer present. And so I can imagine that probably wasn't going to happen. But the Young Bucks stuff and the Kenny Omega stuff, the Elite and Punk, that should have been, turned into something. Even the Hangman Adam Page stuff, that should have been used you could have had years of story with that and made money.
But my point being is, you could see something like that, or again, even the Colt Cabana thing, if that was in WWE, there at least would have been a conversation about it.
Right. Look at the Seth stuff. Seth has a history with Punk and all of that, and they were trying to make money with it until Punk got hurt. But but they'll come back around to it. Same thing with Drew McIntyre and Punk.
And this has honestly made Drew the best version of Drew in years, if ever, or if not ever.
Punk tends to do that.
Such a Punk stand, man. It's not even funny. Anyhow, let's go ahead and wrap this up because we still have a whole show to do.
Yes. What did you think of Punk's thoughts on Vince McMahon? The Vince McMahon stuff?
To be honest, I think at this point we should really just stop using that name and just stop talking about it.
Sorry, he who shall not be named, or
exactly.
But then it's like, who are we talking about? Him or the other guy that Punk mentioned in this interview? You know who I'm talking about, right? Yeah, he mentioned both. If you don't know what we're talking about, people, go back and watch this interview. It's really interesting stuff. We're touching the a tip of the iceberg on this.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. So go back and listen to the stuff with him and what he talks about with McMahon and others. And but honestly, I'm about tired of the whole McMahon thing. I'd be fine if we never talked about McMahon again with everything that's going on. And I know it's hard, and I have no clue how WWE is going to expunge stuff of McMahon out of the history, because you can't. But yeah, so
yeah, and I think Punk pretty much felt the same way too, in kind of how he put it. And then Punk talks about in detail about kind of what happened with the Jack Perry thing backstage, and the only thing I'm going to touch on that is that he basically told he had witnesses too, which is really interesting. He talked about how Tony Schiavone and the doctors and everything all told Jack Perry not to use real glass, and he cussed them out. Well, if any of that, you know, it's always like, oh, take what Punk says with a grain of salt. But if any of those things is untrue, clearly Tony Schiavone would say that on his podcast, but he does not. So he actually uses witnesses that would probably back him up in how that went down. So I'm more inclined to believe CM Punk on this stuff than I am a Jack Perry or even a Tony Khan. But that's just me from what I've gathered.
Well, when we talked about it, I believed Punk in saying that he said not to use real glass, and that Perry threw a hissy fit, and Punk's like, why would you want to?
And he talked about how it was a rental car, and he made a very valid point about how you smash a rental car and you return it, and then next thing you know, rental car companies say we can't rent to wrestlers anymore. And being, a former promoter that has owned his own wrestling promotion, I felt that because I've been in situations like that, where that is the sort of thing that would happen, huh?
Like renting a rental truck that gets the whole side of it scraped out.
Oh, geez, yes, yes. Or having a door punched in, because somebody is mad about a finish, and I'm the one that's on the hook, not the wrestler. And they think that it's going to make things better by offering up a signed autograph of said wrestler instead of paying for the door. But yeah, all those things, I get that though. So from that standpoint, I get it. Now, the other side of that is it's not Punk's company, right? So, but I can see he's not wrong though in that, especially if he was asked to do it. So I honestly put that on Tony Schiavone and those guys. It's like, why would you ask Punk when he's got a reputation, right or wrong, and you're going to have him do this. You know how that's going to look. Why did nobody get on the phone with Tony Khan? He has a phone. Why did nobody get on the phone with Tony Khan and say, hey, you talk to him, or are you giving the okay? You know what I mean? Because that's what it should have been. There should have been, okay, the buck stops with one guy, and that's just not how it is there. You know, you don't know who's in charge of what.
Mhm.
And plus I heard, like, I was listening to Wrestling Observer Live, and Dave Meltzer was saying Tony Khan's at every show, every AEW show. He has not missed, which means he was there. He's there, and these guys decide to go up to Punk to go talk to him instead of going to the boss. What is going on here? That's a badly run company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's yeah.
It is becoming more and more obvious as you go along. I've spoken with people who have left the company, and they left because it was like that. They wouldn't listen and wouldn't go with ideas and wanted to do what they wanted. They wanted to play with their own toys. It's just not the best way I can say it is exactly what this person told me is you don't go out to impress the fans. You don't go out to have matches for fans. You go out there to impress Tony. You go out there to have matches for Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it feels like anymore.
Well, Punk basically kind of said that. He was like, he thought he was being signed there to make money and draw attendance and get ratings and everything, and that's not what they're in business for. And Ariel asked him, well, you know, are they in business? And he was like, I don't know. I guess to have good matches, which isn't a bad thing per se, but at the same time, we're not in the same business, right? So that's probably true. Because he just wants to put on 5-star matches, you know, and they'll never draw a bigger crowd that way.
And I mean, they did great at Wembley for that one, but that's going to be a lot more to do with a huge show like that out of country in Wembley, right? Like the last time when any wrestling was in England that size was back like with the British Bulldog. So
I honestly feel like that had less to do with AEW running a show there. If WWE had put on a big show there, you know, it would have done just as much of attendance, I believe.
Well, if you look at what they did in Australia, right, for Elimination Chamber, Elimination Chamber was not far off in attendance-wise relative to it. Like they pretty much packed the whole place that they were in, and it's the same concept. It's somewhere they don't go.
Right. It's a first-time thing. Let's see them do it again.
Yeah.
You know, apparently it's stalled at like 40,000 tickets right now, so they got a long ways to go to get close to it. They got to like double it. Now, granted, no matches have been announced and all of that, but
yeah, but they were already touting nearly sold out before any matches were announced when they did it the first time.
Right.
But again, it's all dealing with location. You know, the old school saying. So.
Yep.
All right. That being said.
Yep, that's it for that.
All right. So let's go ahead now and talk about some of the best and worst openers of WrestleMania of all time.
Okay. I'm going to start with the top one. And I go back and forth between this and one other, but I'm going to say the obvious choice first. For best. Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, WrestleMania 10. This match had everything. It was two guys that they could have very well main evented a show with this, and honestly, it was better than the main event that came later.
Well, yeah, I would say so.
So they overshadowed that. Now it's arguable whether or not this was the best match on the show, because there was another match that could lay claim to that. In the latter match, with Shawn and Razor, but to start the show, Bret and Owen, they had the story there. You know, who can't get behind a sibling rivalry? And it was such a great technical wrestling match, back and forth. The older brother, showing up the younger brother that thinks he knows everything or thinks he's better. And then, which the story of it was awesome. It was very relatable. And then Owen pulling out the upset victory, like the story was perfect.
And the build up to the match too, like the build up that they were having going up to that was so good.
Yeah, it's a classic feud, and this was, up until that point, there weren't a lot of openers for WrestleMania that were at that level where I think this was really the first one where it was like, wow, this could be a main event match, and this is going on first.
Yep.
So I mean, what? Obviously, you probably agree with that assessment of that match.
100%. Like this was on the top of my head when we started talking about the topic of this, was the top of my head, like number one for me. To be fair, I can remember a lot of other openers, but I think that's a large tout to this, right? Is you remember this as the opener and how big it was for being an opener. As you said, it could have easily main evented. And that's how important this match was, how good the story was, how good the build-up was, and everything else. So.
Yeah. Now, what I was going back and forth on for number, 1 or 2 is another match I really loved. And it was 20 years later, WrestleMania 30.
Okay.
You had Triple H versus Daniel Bryan in the opener. Also could have been a main event, and everything. And that match had a great story too. Whether or not it was the planned, it wasn't the original idea.
Nope.
But it fit perfectly with what happened. They fell into it, and it was better probably than anything that would have, been thought of. And that match was so good. Like, it was so good. And it was also like the Brett and Owen match, Brett would go on to wrestle twice, so did Daniel Bryan. Yep. So very similar circumstances here 20 years later. But fantastic match.
Yeah, it was a very good match. And I think even over the Brett and Owen match, that because of the story of it, Daniel had to win to go into the or make the main event a triple threat for the title, right? And he gets his arm injured in this match. In it. So you now have a story going through the whole rest of WrestleMania and the fans getting like salvation of having Daniel Bryan now in this triple threat now that this match is over. So not only do you have the story of that first match done, it builds into the main event and adds more to that main event, but you have everything through the rest of the show. So the crowd's already going to be on a fever pitch for every match because you start off with a hot match and have a great story to build through it. And like, oh, is Daniel's arm going to still be fine by the time that match comes around? Is he going to be injured still? What's going to happen? Can he go since he just had this other killer match? You had that through the whole thing. Not to bring it up, I can see why it was such a hard one between 1 and 2.
Right, and now that I'm thinking about it, I actually feel like the Triple H and Daniel Bryan match is just a little bit better, and here's why. It actually had stakes because, like you mentioned, Daniel Bryan had to win to get in the main event. If Triple H had won, he'd be in the main event. Because it was whoever won that match would be going on, to make it a triple threat. So it could have been Evolution explodes, or it could have been Daniel Bryan in there. There were actual stakes. Whereas Brett and Owen, whether or not Brett or Owen won, it was more about pride, because if Brett had won, he was still going on to face the winner of the Lex Luger and Yokozuna match later in the show, in the main event for the title. If Brett lost, which he did, then he still went on to main event WrestleMania against the winner of the Lex Luger and Yokozuna match. Owen, even though he beat Brett, didn't get anything. He basically got claims to, okay, if Brett wins the main event, that makes me, it should make me the number one contender, or I should get a title shot down the road, which he had to win the King of the Ring to make that happen.
Well, Brett didn't win, the whole Hogan thing, so.
No, that was 9.
Oh, that was 9.
Yep, that was the year previous.
Those are back to back, and it's exactly the
Yes.
same thing, so my brain tied them together. Yep. Which I'm sure happens to everybody.
Right. So that's why, even though Brett and Owen was probably technically better, the story, because there was actual stakes, there was more drama in the Triple H and Daniel Bryan match.
And not just drama for that match. Like I said before, it kind of caused drama for the whole rest of the show going into that main event. So it added more. Like, you could take Owen and Brett out of WrestleMania 10. And WrestleMania 10 would still been a really good show. Right? Could you do the same thing by taking that opener with Daniel and Triple H out?
I mean, you do have another epic thing later in the show of Undertaker losing his streak, which wasn't necessarily the best match, but it was definitely a memorable moment.
It's true.
So that's arguable to me. I think it changes things, though. If Daniel Bryan's not in the main event, WrestleMania 30 is looked at very differently.
But if Owen and Brett's match doesn't happen at all, does it change the outlook and the look of what WrestleMania 10 was? You still have the ladder match. You still have Brett walking out champion.
The title. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think most of the same feel happens. But it's so much better with Brett and Owen on the card. So,
of course.
Yes, I see your point. I'm just glad it happened the way it did.
So I can definitely see how these are two of the best.
Yes, I went back and forth on both of these. I was like, gosh, I love them both. And I think, honestly, those are two of the best openers for WrestleMania.
Oh, I agree. It's going to be hard to top either of those.
And you won't. There's some other ones that are close, but they're not quite there.
So let's talk now about some not great openers, okay? I'm going to give you one right off the bat that I rewatched today. That was not a very good opener, and a large amount to do with it, I think, was, one, an odd feeling for myself, but two, was the finish of the match. Was WrestleMania 2, Don Morocco versus Paul Orndorff. I remember Don Morocco as a face. I remember Paul Orndorff as a heel. They were flipped in this match. It totally threw me off to begin with. And two, they go through this whole match, right? And they're going pretty well. It's a pretty decent pace. It's a very basic match, very simple match. There's not much of a story outside of just two big, meaty men beating the snot out of each other. Well, they end up working to the outside, and eventually they get a 10 count no DQ, which obviously was not meant to be their actual finish based off of their reactions and the reactions of oh my gosh, my brain just went off on the ring announcer. His name.
Howard. Yep. Is it Howard Finkel?
Howard Finkel. Yes, Howard Finkel. Because Fink was completely confused on what to do. Trying to get somebody's like, what do I say? Yada yada. They spent 3 minutes, and then they cut over to Mr. T's vignette for later, and then comes back to him to give the announcement of what the match was, how the finish was in that match. The match again, it was a no DQ or no contest double DQ finish because they were both on the outside for the 10 count and stuff like that. And mind you, the ref was counting pretty quickly on that 10 count. Like, they were not really out there for that long. It, relative to now, like nowadays, like you have guys out there for like 3 minutes during a 10 count, but this was pretty quick. The finish ruined that match for me. Like, I thought most of it was fine outside of the weirdness of the reversal in face and heel, but it was definitely that finish, which is what ruined that match for me.
Yeah, I really don't like when there's disqualifications at all in the opening match, because I feel like the opener should really set the tone. And if you're setting the tone off that, hey, you're not going to see a finish, in an opener, like, what are you going to see later on when it actually matters?
Exactly.
And like did anybody really care if one of these guys lost? No. I mean, not really. I mean, I don't like that. There's some other matches that ended in DQs in the opener. Like one that really sticks out to me is WrestleMania 9, Tatanka versus Shawn Michaels. And Tatanka's undefeated at this point. Shawn Michaels is the Intercontinental Champion. And they kind of paint themselves into a corner here. Because you think, oh, you're either going to see Tatanka win the Intercontinental title, or you're going to see Tatanka's undefeated streak end. Well, we saw neither. Tatanka wins by countout, and then it's Shawn keeps his belt. Tatanka is still undefeated. Complete cop out when WrestleMania should be the time where you have finishes for most of the time. I think there's times when a DQ is okay because it furthers a story. But in that situation, it's a cop out to me.
Well, I agree. And I always consider WrestleMania, especially later WrestleManias, as the season finale for wrestling, right? Because we don't have weeks off, right? We don't take time off. But WrestleMania, for story wise, is a season finale. But what you can do is you can have cliffhangers, as it were. So like a DQ finish or dirty finish or like a surprise return that causes a new storyline to be created after WrestleMania. Those are all the cliffhanger finishes of the season finale. But a lot of times you want like nice wrap ups to the season finale, and most of the time for what you're doing. And that's what you get in most WrestleManias, right? You get the blow off of whatever that storyline is. To paraphrase an American Nightmare, you need to finish the story. And WrestleMania is the place to do that. You don't get that when you have those DQ finishes. And I also agree with you on the DQ finish as the opener. Really, any dirty finish, honestly, for the most part, as an opener, because, like you said, it sets the tone. What it also does is it takes away a playable card for the rest of the show. If I start my show off with a dirty finish, then it really diminishes a possible use of a dirty finish later in the show because I've already done that. So you want to save those for bigger things, and make it worth it. You want ostensibly a clean match as your opener most of the time.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like it. I mean, there's rare situations, but I don't really like it when there's a ref bump in the first match, or blood in the first match. There's rare exceptions where it makes sense, but it really has to make sense for it to happen. I feel like this would have been so much better if they had put something else as the opener, and then they could have, if they were going to do this DQ finish, move that to later in the show. You didn't need to do it in the opener. You know,
assuming that they were doing like a 7-8 match card, which is pretty common back in the day for that, you could have easily had this as like 5 or 6.
I would have been fine even if they swapped 1 and 2. Even if they had it be second and had, a
It's
hot
a mid
finish.
card title. Like, I would have preferred it later, but
Yeah, I get it. Because they did the angle later on where after the Lex Luger and Mr. Perfect match, they had Lex Mr. Perfect chasing after Lex because he had cheated to win. And then Sean's back there, and it actually ends up, Sean and Perfect get into it, or Sean lays out Perfect, and so it branches off into that story. I like things like that because it's like, okay, we've had our matches, now here's on to the next feud, right? And off of something simple like that. But if you're going to do that, why couldn't you have done Lex and Perfect first, and then you could have had the Shawn Michaels thing second there, and it would have made sense. Like, Shawn beats him up because he's next in line to go out, and so you have him come out. He goes out, and what if then you had Perfect come out to cost him the match, or to, I don't know. There's so much. I think there could have been a more creative way to make it make sense and still be super exciting.
Yeah.
But that's the Booker in me speaking.
Yeah. With that, let's see. So we had a couple of not great ones. Let's go ahead and throw back another good one for an opener. What do you got?
So I think this is kind of a given, and it's almost like a cop-out to me, but any of the Money in the Bank ladder matches that open the show for WrestleMania, I think there were a couple of them. Either one of those you could put next as good openers, because it's a great way to start off WrestleMania. The only problem with the Money in the Bank matches to open a WrestleMania, or to even be on a WrestleMania, is the only thing that matters there is who comes out of it the winner, because you're going to see the crazy high spots. You're going to see that, and that's partially why people watch them. But if you have a bad winner, or somebody that the winner didn't end up, meaning as much, it's not going to be as memorable, because it's a car wreck. It's like, okay, that was great. It's like a lot of AEW matches sometimes. It's like, oh my gosh, that was a big bloody brawl. But am I going to remember that a week from now, 2 weeks, a year from now?
So I had to just think here just now of one that, and it wasn't the opener, but it was a Money in the Bank match, and I think it was at a Money in the Bank pay-per-view. It was during the COVID. It was the Money in the Bank on tie-up of Titan Tower. Do you remember who wins this?
Asuka wins the women's.
Yes.
The men's Money in the Bank for that. Oh gosh, I want to say, let's see, 2020.
He didn't end up cashing it in, if that helps.
It's not. Oh my gosh. Who was it?
It was Otis.
Oh geez. That's right. That's right.
He ended up not getting the cash in. In fact, he gets it taken from him like 3 months later, by The Miz. Well, I had to think about it, like, who won that? But the moment I was thinking about that pay-per-view specifically, I was trying to think of who won that. You know what part comes into my head? It wasn't who won the match, but it was Baron Corbin throwing Rey Mysterio off the roof.
Oh jeez. Booyaka booyaka.
Yeah, but that's the thing, like you're talking about, right? If you get a person who's not like really going to be a good ambassador, let's say, for that Money in the Bank title or Money in the Bank contract, you're going to end up with people not really remembering much of that thing, or not being very happy with it, but maybe remembering certain spots, like Rey getting thrown off, or Asuka winning it to then have the belt inside because Becky had to leave because she was pregnant.
Right. And like, one of the Money in the Banks that opened up WrestleMania was the one Mr. Kennedy won.
Yes. Who didn't get the cash in either,
Right.
ended up losing the
To
opportunity
Edge.
to Edge. Yep.
Right, and Edge ended up winning I think that was the second Money in the Bank they had ever done because Edge cashed in 2 times in a row, basically.
I know. I'm pretty
No.
sure it wasn't. Yeah. I'm
Oh,
pretty
you're
sure
right.
that
You're right. Rob Van Dam was one in between because he cashed
yeah.
in the ECW pay per view. That makes sense. That's right.
But
But
yeah.
yeah, that one is another one where it's like because of what happened with it, like technically, as far as an opening match at WrestleMania, really good match, right?
And Kenny
I
was
can't.
hot. Like he was the right person to
Right,
win it.
he was if that would have worked out, and that's hindsight, right?
Yeah.
Nothing they could have done to predict. But at the same time, I can't tell you anything about that match other than I'm sure Shelton Benjamin did some crazy spots because that's what he always did in those matches.
It's true.
But I know it was a good match because they always were. But, and it's probably better than most other openers. But at the same time, it's also forgettable. So I don't know. It's in that weird conundrum. It's like, okay, there weren't better matches than this, but those car wreck style matches, like it takes a lot for them to really stand out.
It is, and to be memorable at least, right?
Right.
While watching it,
Mm-hmm.
you enjoy it, and it gets the crowd hot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
let's talk about that too, like with what an opener of any show should do, right? And that's exactly that, is to get the crowd hot. They're like the opener for a comic, right, or for a band. The opening match needs to get the crowd warmed up, get them excited for the show and everything else, and kind of set the tone, like you said earlier, for the rest of the show. If the opener kind of sucks, then the next match has that much more that it has to do to get the crowd behind them, and then subsequently more and more.
And
But if that,
that's why I don't like it when it ends at DQ because you've already pissed off the crowd in the opening match and not in a good way, right? Not in a
Well,
heel winning, it's like, oh no, we'll
they
cheer
chanted
for
it too in WrestleMania 2. They chant bullshit in that.
Mhm.
What happens because they were so mad.
Right. It's like, I don't know. It's now Money in the Bank. That's probably a perfect opener for WrestleMania because you start them off really hot. It's not going to mean it doesn't really mean a lot. I mean, it does because of who wins, because they're probably going to go on to win the belt or at least have a good chance. But at the same time, it's not going to take away from really the rest of the card because everything's going to be different than that.
Yep.
So that's kind of, I mean, would you kind of agree on the assessment of the Money in the Bank matches for WrestleMania?
I think it is, and I think it's a good choice. It's something I kind of feel is missing. Like, I don't mind having Money in the Bank as its own pay per view, but I always liked it better as part of WrestleMania. It made it feel more special. It also felt like an easier way to get more people on the show without having to overbloat the show, and it's allowed you to do like we talked about previously about being that season finale, right? So you have these guys. Let's say we have people like Ricochet or Kofi Kingston, or like these guys who don't often get like they wouldn't be seen to get those title shots, but you get that opportunity to go through the whole season of wrestling to build your name up good enough to at least make it onto that card through Money in the Bank and get your opportunity so then you can build that as your story for the following season. And I always like that for WrestleMania. Money in the Bank always kind of feels, as the pay-per-view itself, a little lackluster because you have the 2 Money in the Bank matches and that's it. And then the rest of the card is just basic.
Except for in 2011. Wow. When you had CM Punk versus John Cena as the main event. That was actually probably the best Money in the Bank pay-per-view they ever did.
But the other thing, too, is when you have Money in the Bank as an opener, it kind of, like I talked about earlier with Daniel Bryan and Triple H, it then causes a fever pitch of, oh, is so and so going to cash in tonight at the main event, or are they going to cash in these other matches, what have you, right? Because it gives that opportunity, that additional story for the show, for the show as a whole. Is now there is that buzz of, oh, are they going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Which you don't get anymore. I mean, you could theoretically right now you kind of get it because Damian Priest still hasn't cashed in, and he might decide to cash in on Seth or on Cody and Roman.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It doesn't feel as much of a buzz as if it happened that night.
Yeah, I just saw who was in the second Money in the Bank at WrestleMania, and this one actually was memorable. So I'll put this one there. CM Punk ends up winning it, and so I definitely remember that one. That was a pretty good one. That set off a lot of things in motion. I had
Jesus
to.
Christ.
I'll
You
give
need to
you
move off of his lap to give room for AJ, okay?
what?
You need to move off of his lap to get room for AJ.
Okay. I've got a bad one. Another bad one.
Okay.
Here. There was there was a tag team match with, hold on real quick here. It was with there we go. Big Boss Man and Bull Buchanan versus D'Lo Brown and the Godfather. Yeah.
WrestleMania 15?
WrestleMania 2000. Which would have been WrestleMania 16. Yeah, 16. 16.
16. Okay, so I was close.
16. You were close. Yep. That one.
Just by the names, I knew it was going to be bad. Like, there was no way that was going to be a good match.
No, and it's like it wasn't. That one, like, you don't get the crowd involved in that. It's like I would have personally, with what else is on that show, I would have probably put I mean, it was a pretty packed show actually, but I would have put let's see here. They could have done, oh my gosh. This is an okay show. They could have done, I mean, I guess they could have done the TLC match with the Dudleys and Matt and Jeff, but maybe that was too early to do that. They could have done Kurt Angle versus Benoit and Jericho in the Eurocontinental match where it was two falls, each one getting
I remember that, yeah.
They could have done that as an opener, and that would be a hot one.
Yeah. I think I'd rather have the TLC as the opener because it kind of goes to the thought we talked about with the Money in the Bank, right? Where it gets the crowd hot. The other nice thing about having like those kind of gimmick matches at the top is you don't have to have the prep time, right? You see it a lot of times where they'll cut over to like a long vignette or a long promo or something like that off camera or off away from the ring because they have to get things set up, right? Which they have to do for this for TLC. You wouldn't have to do that in an opener per se. So I would have liked to seen that, and like, there's no way that this tag match was going to be very good,
right?
And it falls into the third spot on the card for most bookers. Third spot is the height spot. You have that match is probably not going to be the greatest, so you hide it in the third spot because you have one crowd's going to be super hot, which you need to have that as a strong thing. Honestly, in my opinion, in booking booking the show, you have the match is going to bring people back as your main event, right? Whatever that is, be your champion or whatever, right? And then you have the next one down is the big crowd favorite as the sub main. But the best workers on the show are always my opener. Because they're the ones that get the crowd hot. No matter how the rest of the card goes, unless you have that one couple of guys that just tank the crowd, they're always going to be as hot as that main or that opener gets you started at. And if you don't do that, it's always going to lose it. And that's why you hide worse matches at third, because you have high 1, hopefully a higher 2, 3 brings it down, it's not going to get lower than 1, and then you keep going back up.
And there's like I know like on indie wrestling, that usually has an intermission, with or at least a lot of indie promotions do that where they have the intermission. Putting it right after the intermission, like a match that's not so good, is also the death spot, because everybody's coming back from intermission and taking their time, and they might miss most of the match.
Yep.
And so that kind of is a spot for that too. But yeah, I'm looking at this card for WrestleMania 2000 though, and other than like 3 matches, it's a crap card. Well,
that was the main event with McMahon every corner, right?
Yes, and that wasn't even that should have been. I'll tell you right now, and we've done the rebooking the main events. That should have been Rock and Triple H 1-on-1. Is what it should have been, and it would have been more fondly remembered. But I'm like looking at this, and you've got Test and Prince Albert versus Al Snow and Steve Blackman. Oh my gosh. Terry versus the Cat in a cat fight. With Val Venus, the guest referee. You got Too Cool in China versus Eddie Guerrero, Parasite, or Dean Malenko. I mean, Kane and Rikishi against Road Dogg and X-Pac. None of these sound like I'm going to go out of my way to go see. I'll go out of my way to see.
You did get the red dancing machine in that one, though.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, there's really, I'll go out of my way to see the TLC match. I'll go out of my way to see the Kurt Angle versus Jericho and Benoit. I'll fast forward through most of the main event to get to, the final little bit. They do have the Hardcore Battle Royal, so that one's kind of...
That one could have easily opened.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a guilty pleasure for me, as far as, that's kind of one of those things. It's like, it's much better than it has any right to be.
Remind me, was that the one too where Crash Holly won it like 7 times in that match?
Oh yeah, a lot of people did, but yes. And then the finish was messed up. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So Hardcore Holly ends up actually winning it, but he wasn't supposed to. Crash was supposed to retain, but they didn't. They messed up the timing on the finish, and so the referee had no choice but to count at the end. So it was a mess. So
yeah, this was like, I don't remember this match. I'll be flat out. I do not remember the match at all. But knowing the era and who was in it, save Boss Man, this was going to be a shit match.
Yes. And Bossman's very much like, he works up to the talent that he's in the ring with. And so if he's in there with, not good workers, he could dog it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so yeah, that one wasn't good. I'll tell you one that's sneaky good is at WrestleMania 7. This is a great opener. You've got here it is. You got the Rockers versus the Barbarian and Haku. Great tag team match. Like, fantastic opener back then. You should go back and watch it if you haven't seen it. Or if you haven't seen it for a long time, you don't remember it. Great tag team match. And I'll even throw out, I really liked Shawn Michaels versus Tito Santana from WrestleMania 8. It was the first time that Shawn Michaels was really breaking out as a single star. And Tito Santana was the perfect foil. I mean, the perfect person to get him over. So, fantastic.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with either of those. I mean, I'm as much as you are a CM Punk stan at now. So I'm not going to say a Brett stan. As much as you're a CM Punk stan, I'm a Shawn Michaels stan. So like, I'm never going to say no to some more Shawn. And then of course the Rockers.
Mm-hmm.
But tying it back to not a great match, and since you brought up Tito, WrestleMania 1, Tito versus the Executioner, who was Playboy Buddy Rose in a mask, a really bad mask, and stuff like that. And like, it literally looked like they could not figure out an opener for this match, and they just like, hey, buddy, go throw on like whatever gear you have that's extra and a mask, so we can get you into this like thing. Because it was not a good look. It was not. Mind you, this is WrestleMania 1, so they didn't know what WrestleMania quality would have been, but this was not a WrestleMania quality gear of any variety. And the match was fine, but the thing that killed me for the match, I think that's what it was so hard for it, is the Executioner talks about how he's going to go after Tito's leg because Tito's leg had been injured the week before by Valentine. And or Greg the Hammer Valentine, for people who don't know what I'm talking about. He was had injured it, and so Executioner was going to go after it. And for like 3 seconds at the beginning of the match, he does, and then never touches it again. Doesn't even attempt to go for the leg, and it was driving me nuts the whole time I was watching the match.
Yeah. The psychology wasn't that great. I could see your point there. I'd also say though that this was the first WrestleMania. They hadn't figured out really a good formula. They really, if you look at this card, it's really a bunch of matches put together, to basically support the big matches that are on this show. Most of the matches didn't have much of a story until you got to the second half of the show. And there wasn't a lot of match quality was really lacking back then. But they didn't have to do a lot back then, right? They went out there, had a match, and they got over based off their characters. And that's pretty much what happened here. Tito was over, and he comes out later, to kind of get in the face of Greg the Hammer Valentine after the Junkyard Dog finish and whatnot. But yeah, that match was just kind of there. It had they could have put anything there and it would have been what it was.
Well, I think this match was literally thrown on at the last minute to give Santino or Tito, excuse me, a bit of a rub for the fans. Be like, hey, this is who this guy is. You need to like him. Make him be happy that he's going to eventually come out later and go and yell at Valentine. That's exactly what this whole match was for. But it also felt like it was last minute because of such.
Right. It was basically like, it's like, okay, we need to give a reason for Tito to be in the building. It's like, let's put him out there first, and so that he's not completely. I almost said something else. That he's, and then it's like, oh, that wouldn't come out right. I'll tell you off air, but
Okay.
But yeah, it's they threw it together because I feel like I lost my train of thought. That's what I
can
feel
tell.
like.
You got thrown off totally.
Yes, I completely got thrown off. It was something about Tito. It probably would have been interesting. I don't know.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's go and find one more really good opener.
Yes. I shall give you, for a really good one. Oh, there's a lot of bad ones here. Man, the openers, they didn't get really good at the openers until later. I feel. I'll give you one. Gosh, I'm trying to think of which WrestleMania it was. Hold on, I'm almost there. What about... What was the one that Seth Rollins wrestled Brock Lesnar in the opener
I was
for the
thinking about that one
championship?
earlier. 32?
35. I just found it.
35. Oh, wow.
35. So Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a fantastic match. However, as far as star power and putting one of your world titles, the Universal title out there to start the show, and I know the rumor is, Brock wanted it first because if he couldn't be last, he wanted it first so he could get out of the building. That was just Brock's, MO basically. But
That was the women's triple threat main, right? For that one, I believe.
ooh, I believe you're right. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So that makes sense that Brock would be like, all right, they're putting the women, main eventing to put my match first and get me out of there. So, especially if I'm going to be doing the job. That match though, it did what it was supposed to do. Probably, started off the crowd hot because you've got Brock Lesnar, starting the show with Seth, Rollins. That was before it was Seth freaking Rollins.
And it was one of Brock's better matches. Like, Seth and him had a good chemistry. I think Cody's triple threat matches, not triple threat matches, but the triple matches that Cody had with Brock towards the end were better matches than this one. But this one was still a really good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a good one. It served its purpose. It's not going to be, it's not in the class of Brett and Owen and those ones, or Money in the Bank ladder match or anything like that. Yep. But as far as star power, you can't get bigger than that.
It's true.
For an opener.
Very true. It being also the main event, that might have been the first time that the title, like a big main event title, was defended as the opener as well.
It actually was not, because you had Edge in his retirement match before he came back. Years later, dropped the WWE or the world title to Alberto Del Rio in an opener. And that was the opener. So I forget which WrestleMania it was. I want to say that was probably 2010 or something. Let's see.
28.
I'm getting close. Let's see. That would have been 25, 27.
27. Okay.
27. So close. In 2011. Yeah. So they had Ed. Actually, Edge did not drop the title over Del Rio.
I was gonna say, I think he was champion when he retired.
He was champion when he retired. So he wins this match and then retires the next night.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
And that match was fine too. Like, to be honest, like, it was not a bad match by any means. I don't know if I put that one over Brock or vice versa. I almost probably put him on the same plane because it did what it needed to do. And honestly, now think about it, if we never got Edge back, that would have had more gravitas to it because of being Edge's last match.
Yeah, I look at it a different way though, because I look at it as, in the Brock thing, Brock put somebody else over there, Seth, and Edge, knew he was going to retire the next night, I'm sure, and still went out on top. That shows how much they thought of Alberto Del Rio. They'd rather vacate the title than drop it to somebody when they have the opportunity to do so. Yeah.
Had he already started having all the different problems he ended up having at that point, Del Rio?
Del Rio? No. I mean, not... No, I don't believe so, because he won the Royal Rumble. They wouldn't have done that if he had all those problems. So I think that came later.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, the match itself is fine. Like, on both of them, And at that point, Brock I guess hadn't done the job for Roman Reigns yet. In at WrestleMania.
No, he had not. Yeah, so that makes it interesting there. Yeah, it was because they got out of it the previous year or whatever because of or one of the previous years. They got out of it with Seth Rollins cashing in, so that was kind of a throwback there that Seth beats him again, beats Brock. So interesting. But have you heard what the opener's going to be for this weekend's WrestleMania? I have.
Oh, what?
So they're opening.
Rumored, supposedly, not confirmed yet.
Right. We'll say rumored. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I'll pull it up. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, you're not Dave Meltzer that has the dirt sheet a month beforehand. So.
Right. Let's see. WrestleMania 40. Card.
Trying to think of what we could have as the opener before you get there.
Yes.
What would I have as the opener? Night 2, I would probably have Seth and Drew as the opener of that one. But night 1, overarching opener.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure.
The rumored opener for night 1 is Rhea Ripley versus Becky Lynch.
Mm-hmm. That was on my thought, but I'm like, I don't know if I put that one off. I mean, that'll be hot. That'll be super hot.
Super hot opener, I think. I mean, you're obviously going to main event with the tag match with Rock and Roman and Cody and Seth. You can't not, right? Because you're not having Rock be the opener and you're not putting him anywhere else. So that's night 1. For night 2, this is going to shock you too. They're rumored opening night 2 with Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre.
That's the one I suggested. Yeah.
With Punk on commentary.
Because that gives you opportunity, right? Let's say that Seth and Drew do their whole thing, right? Yada, yada, yada. Mm. And after the end of the match, no matter who wins, the Bloodline comes out and just destroys Seth.
Mm-hmm. And then Damian Priest cashes in.
Or you could do that as a cash in for him too, yeah.
Well, think about that, especially if Seth were to win and then the Bloodline, destroys him, so he can't interfere later in the match, especially if Bloodline won the first night. Then you've got, so Seth wins, right? So he's not losing both back-to-back nights, but then you have Damian Priest come out to cash in because he's a beaten down. That'd be a heck of a way to start night 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the rumored. We'll see if we're right there, but I haven't been this excited for WrestleMania in a long, long time.
Me too, man. And more importantly, not only excited, but I think part of my excitement, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is I really can't predict most of the matches of who's going to win.
Mm-hmm. Because
the only one.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say the only two I'm a high percentage positive of what's going to happen is the main events. I see Bloodline winning night 1 and Cody winning night 2. Best story for the whole thing, for all around. That feels like the most logical, best story to go. But that being said, it's high on the probability for me in my brain, but that's like 70-ish% for both matches.
There's always the chance, because we've been saying this for how long now? And you keep, and I keep saying, what if Roman's champion still, a year from now? We said that after he held it for a year. 3 years later, he's still champion.
There is a difference, though, from this year going into this year compared to the last several when we talked about it. Roman's match count, right?
Has
Roman's
gone way down.
Has only had 4, I believe, matches this the year, 4 to 6 in that range, where he was having like 10 to 12 matches like the year before, and obviously a lot more before that. I couldn't imagine him winning it and like having less matches on there or more matches, honestly. Like, I can't see a reason why you would have Roman win outside of passing Hogan.
I mean, he's working back-to-back nights now, so I mean, he's stepping up his game.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I want to say Cody's going to win, but there's still that little bit of doubt that I'll believe it when I see it.
30%. That's my 30% for both of them.
Imagine how pissed off the crowd would be, and the internet, if Roman is still champion, and or if Rock screws Cody, and they go off in that direction, and Roman's still champ. Holy cow! Talk about everything would explode.
I was higher a percentage wise until they brought the Rock stuff in. Like 3 months ago when they were building to this, and I was probably about 90% positive that Cody was winning. I'm at 70% now, and the only reason I'm at 70% now, a positive, is I could theoretically see them keeping the belt on Roman to have the Roman and Rock match that they really wanted to have at WrestleMania later on, or possibly as far as WrestleMania 41, which would be so dumb. So dumb.
Well, here's the thing. I slightly disagree with you, because every time we think that this storyline is slowing down, they've kept it going in such a way where it's like a whole new chapter where we're like, this is awesome. Like the last 3 years, how many big moments have there been or twists and turns in this storyline? I now have 100% faith in the booking that if they do continue it, that whatever they do is going to be better than what we're thinking. Because we thought after Cody lost last year, it's like, oh, that was the bad move, that was a mistake, it won't last. And then look at all the big moments we've had since then, and then with the Rock stuff, it's almost breathed new life into the story.
And then the Rock stuff kind of fell into their lap, right?
Right.
Because it wasn't going to, like, one, the Rock stuff wasn't initially going to happen. They didn't have that opportunity. But when they took it, or had it, they tried to run with it being Rock and Roman. The fans lost their damn mind, understandably. And yes, don't get me wrong. I don't know what their initial plans were with Rock and Roman, or with Cody, to do Cody and Seth, or, with Punk if they was there or whatnot. But I'm not even going to say they made lemonade out of lemons that happened. They straight up made gold out of the lemonades that happened. Because I can't imagine anything better than what we're getting right now, right? You're still getting Rock on the pay-per-view. You're getting Rock as the best heel he's probably ever been.
Yes.
Right? You're getting Roman, and you're getting an opportunity to work out of the tribal chief stuff with Roman, with having the stuff with The Rock, if you end up wanting to do it that way. You get a callback to Cody's original WrestleMania moment by working with Seth again. You're getting Cody finishing his story, probably, and everything else, who is the best babyface we've had in probably 15 years. And then you've got Seth Rollins to kind of just put the icing on the cake of the whole thing for his wrestling quality and also a great babyface in this. There could not have been a better way to go with this. Not to mention the little side accoutrements of the stuff with Jay and Jimmy, and then the stuff with Drew and Seth, which is amazing. And then you have Damian Priest like around the edge of all this. This is it. This is the best WrestleMania of all time on paper.
Do you feel like, with everything that happened last year with Cody losing, I feel like they've made it bigger. They've made it mean more. If Cody wins this year, it means more than if he would have won last year.
I agree. I think they did it in a way, and they built a story in a way where it totally means more. And that's actually part of the reason why I think that you have the Bloodline winning night one. Because it's that last minute to tack on just that one more obstacle to have to beat Roman and to overcome to get over there. Because that's exactly what this has been the whole time.
Right. If Cody's winning, then everybody's expecting that. So obviously you want to place as much doubt in people's minds on night one and even going into the main event. So like even earlier in the night, if they did count Seth, that you possibly can. So that the people that think, oh, he's winning for sure, they're doubting now, like, oh, how is he going to overcome this? Is Roman going to keep the belt? My only gripe is that Roman almost seems like an afterthought right now with all the Rock stuff. And so if he loses, you've got a 3-year plus reign kind of going out with a whimper. And that places a doubt in my mind of whether or not this is really the last chapter.
I can see that. That being said, did you watch the Roman Reigns documentary that was on A&E? The Legends of?
I have not yet.
So I'm going to spoil a little bit for you.
Okay.
The very last thing he says at the end is dealing with this match. He pretty much announced that he's retiring if he loses this match.
And that's why I think there's a chance he might not.
I think there's a chance that raised my chance of him losing, because this is a way for him to take proper time off. Not that he's been working a lot, but
yeah, because he obviously won't retire after this match, because I think they fully plan on still doing Rock and Roman at some point.
Well, I think what they do is, because of how hot The Rock is as a heel right now, what I would like to see, and what they might do with it, is Roman does take that time away. Right? And maybe come back as a new babyface version of himself. Something different than he was before, and stuff like that, to take on The Rock in 41 as heel version of Rock where he is now. Because, I don't know how much The Rock's going to be involved over the next year. But
I didn't think he'd be involved this much.
Right? He's been at so many tapings. And stuff
more
like
than
that.
Roman.
Yeah. It's insane. And if they were to do that, where he'd come in every once in a while and do stuff, because they'll probably have it where Seth and Rock have a match. Or, not Seth, Cody and Rock have a match. Going up after this.
I would say maybe SummerSlam.
Yeah. And you do Rock and Roman for 41, but you put Roman as the face. Leave Rock as the heel. Flip it to what was expected for everything else, and you give that much more for Roman. But he has to take time away to come back to do that. Which means he needs to lose against Cody.
Yeah, it's a coin flip for me. Like, I feel like it's so obvious that Cody is winning that makes me doubt it. that now, if this were somebody else booking, they'd be like, everybody's expecting Cody to win. Let's swerve him, bro.
Let's swerve him, bro. How about I win?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. With all that being said, guys, I want to know what you guys think. I want to hear what your predictions are for the main event. Is it going to be Cody or is it going to be Roman? Reach out to us on our social medias on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Be Hero Media. You can reach out to me directly at Mike Burke DCW on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and Mike Burke Pro on Twitter. You can also reach out to Psycho at Psycho Wrestling on Facebook. Oh man, what a show this has been! It's been long too. I mean, to be fair, part of that is dealing with somebody having to get their love on for a certain punk.
Hey, I didn't plan the interview.
That being said, guys, I want to let you guys know as this airs tomorrow, that will be March 5th. Try again, April 5th in Salt Lake City, Utah. Your pre-show to WrestleMania weekend, we will be doing DCW's Payment Due at Light Tree Studios. It's going to be a super fun show. I'm super excited. Tickets are nearly gone. So if you want to get tickets, get them now. Reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly through all my stuff I mentioned earlier. But you can also reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram at Devotion Championship Wrestling. You can reach out to us on TikTok at Devotion Wrestling and on Twitter at DCW Salt Lake City. In addition to that, on March, jumped a little part back, on April 12th and 13th, we will be at FitCon at the Mountain America Center or Mountain America Expo here in Salt Lake City. So if you guys want to come down, see us, we'll have a nice big booth. We'll have the ring set up. We're also going to be doing free tryouts at there, so you can come in and see what it's like to be a wrestler, get in the ring a little bit. In addition to that, we will be up May 11th at Tussle Time in Ogden for Tussle Time 12 at Kamikazes. All the information for everything we're doing, again, is on our social medias. Reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram at Devotion Championship Wrestling, TikTok Devotion Wrestling, and DCW Salt Lake City on Twitter. All right, Psycho. Anything else?
No, I can't wait for WrestleMania. I can't wait for it all because I know there's going to be twists and turns.
Me too, man. Me too. And to give you guys a little prep, next week we will either do one of two things. Do part 1 for next week's episode of WrestleMania Review, or try and do part 1 and 2 dropping as 2 separate ones next week. We'll see how I feel about editing all of that together. It's all set and ready to go. So stay tuned. Follow us on our social medias to find out what we do. That being said, guys, for the rest of Be Hero Media, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And for me and Psycho, this is where we're going to tap out. Have a good night, guys.